Everybody ready?
Ready.
Good, okay. Welcome. Okay, so look, welcome everybody and welcome everybody online. And thank you particularly to those of you who have made the effort on this hot summer day to come to Birmingham, to the centre of Birmingham. You guys online don't know what you're missing. We're in a fab location and we've got a great programme for you this afternoon, other than the AGM, which is always riveting, as everybody knows. We've also welcomed a disproportionately high proportion of younger people in the room than we normally have, which is just fantastic. And later on, we're going to be, Marianne is going to be leading a discussion with our younger people's panel. So thank you all very much for coming along today. And then after that, we're going to break and then have a presentation from Matthew Kelly, a talk on his history book, which is at the back with copies to buy. And it's also got a foreword by me, so you must buy that. Okay, serious business. So the first thing to say is the meeting is being live streamed from the back, as you can see, and we will be making a recording of it to share across the network. But I should just say, if anybody doesn't want to be filmed at all, could you make yourself known to a member of staff and we'll put you in a place where that won't happen. Okay, so moving on, the first item on the agenda is the minutes of the last meeting, which I have here and I'll sign in a minute. Can I take them as a correct record for those who were there last year? Yep. Good, thank you. Thank you, everybody. We don't have to approve that. And just in terms of today's processes, all the voting is done in the hall, so nobody online is voting. Anybody can give a proxy to somebody in the room. So I have a number of proxies from people who are watching online. And all the motions are done, the resolutions are passed by a simple vote of yes, no, and abstain. And at the end, unless there is a request for a ballot, I will announce the results of each resolution. Okay, so that's the sort of formal stuff. Let me now move on to a few comments from me. It's always very difficult to have a talk about the year last year when you're 7 months into the following year. And it's doubly difficult this year because, of course, we're in the middle of our centenary year. So you will have to forgive me and forgive Roger, because we're going to talk quite a lot about the last 6 or 7 months, not just last year. And Roger is going to give you much more detail than I am. But the first thing I wanted to say is that I'm now 6 years into being chair of CPRE and would normally have retired at this point, but I'm keeping going for another year. And my goodness, we have gone a huge, a huge distance in that period. If anybody was around when I made my first couple of years speeches here, they were not upbeat, to say the least. There were distinct tensions between the network and national, and things were not all that happy. But we are now working, I would say, incredibly well together. And a lot of that has been down to the creation of the Assembly, ably chaired by Mike Proctor, who we will thank in a minute. But it has allowed for a real exchange of views between the national organisation and the network in an increasingly meaningful way. Yes, we're having to make progress, but still a lot of people come to those online meetings, and we're getting better and better at making them into interesting and meaningful discussions between, if you like, the two sides. But as I always described it, it was always intended as an Arthurian round table, where it's not national and the network, it's all of us round a table together. So that's great. And the sort of things that we've been doing recently, going back to last year, the way in which everybody rallied round to write to MPs to support the Sunshine Bill at the beginning of last year was a real note of where collective action can put pressure on, in this case, Parliament, to listen and to vote and to support things that we advocate for. And it proved to be really powerful and resulted in the end in the Future Home Standards mandating rooftop solar for all buildings, for all houses from 2027 on. And when we heard concerns from the network that we weren't being robust enough in our condemnation of mega solar farms across the country, we listened again, and we've strengthened our pitch on those things. So it's as we move forward, it's becoming more and more of a two-way forum, and you have definitely helped us create the new strategy, which I will talk about in a minute. One of the things that we did last year as well was that we went on through this process called Theory of Change, where we stepped back and looked and thinking about the approaching centenary. Was our mission and our vision still relevant? But particularly, what outcomes were we looking for? What were the outputs and the impact of our work in the countryside? What was it? Was it still the same as it had always been, or did we need to revise it? And what did we have the skills and so on and so forth to deliver it? That work led directly to a review of our strategy. And the strategy is now virtually drawn up. We have the framework for it, and it's solidly based in the defence and improvement of the countryside and getting support among as big a population in the country as we can. And it's confirmed something that I think we were beginning to forget a bit, is that we are fundamentally a campaigning organisation. We are not just, yes, we produce reports, but we're not fundamentally a think tank. We are a network of county groups and national working together to campaign for the countryside. And if you do that, you need different skills from the skills that we may have already. So at the moment, we are going through, at this very moment, as most of you know, we're going through an organisational review, because having looked at the strategy and the direction of travel and the skills and experience that we believe we need for the next century, and to take this new strategy forward, we need some different skills and experience in the room. And I do want to acknowledge that these moments can be exciting for everybody on that journey, but equally they can be hard for people individually for the future. And I want to acknowledge that. Turning now to the centenary. Centenaries obviously are points where you look back, and later on we're going to be hearing from Matthew Kelly and the history. They're also points to look forward, and we've got the Future Rural book, which we published earlier in the year. But for me also, one of the most profound impacts of the centenary has been as a moment of self-reflection, thinking about who we are and how we deliver our messages and our impact. And it was brought home to me very early on in the year when the Bristol and Avon group, and I think Sarah Pitt is online, put on a most extraordinary concert in the Bristol Beacon with the Bristol Youth Orchestra, film behind it of the English countryside, words of prose and poetry. And it was an extraordinary, some of us were there, it was an extraordinary, moving occasion. And what it brought home to me was how, as a technocratic organisation that spends a lot of time thinking about planning policy and so on, and land use planning, what have you, actually the fundamental thing that had people crying in that concert was that emotional connection between the music and the countryside, and seeing that this countryside that we have fought for 100 years to preserve is something of immense value to everybody. And that whole message was reinforced at the Chelsea Flower Show, where, as you will all know, we won Best in Show, whatever it's called now, Garden of the Year, for Sarah Eberle's garden on the Edge. And again, what really struck home was the emotional response that people had to that garden. It was a thing of extreme beauty. And it's interesting that she was in the press yesterday being interviewed, and she said she was actually most happy that the garden is relocating to Sheffield, to Park Hill, where that whole business of, because it's very much where our message is around, there you have this huge brutalist development of flats in the 1970s, and within it, this natural shape with Gaia, the figure of Gaia lying in it, and the emotional, again, play between the two. And that has given a great impetus to our On the Edge campaign, which we launched off the back of the garden. And what it does, for me, what it says is that these campaigns need to springboard off an emotional connection, off an emotional message. And it has really resonated when people think about how much they value their local space. The space is often unregarded, undeveloped, and often a national disgrace, can be things of beauty. And that means something to people. And this can be a real rallying cry, it seems to me, this campaign, that will have real legs as we take it forward, and we will take it forward in the long term, because it has this base of emotional connection with the countryside at its heart. And last week, continuing the run of successful centenary events, we had our conference in Stratford in East London on land use planning, and that showed again our power as a convening organisation. We were founded as a convening organisation to bring people with disparate views but a love of the countryside together in a room. And that's just what we did last week. So although we are operating in a very, very tough environmental, political world at the moment, where the present government is distinctly anti-rural, is composed of people who have very little understanding of the rural agenda, and although we hope that Andy Burnham, who has a real sense of place around Manchester, will be a more sympathetic Prime Minister, provided he is, one assumes he's going to be, we're not assured of success. But the successes of this year say to me that we need to have confidence that we are an organisation that can wield influence and change policy and change people's minds. I think we have been an organisation that has lacked confidence over the last few years, but I see that confidence returning. There will be no quick fixes in this, and one of the lessons of our history is that campaigns take a long time. When we started campaigning for the preservation of the countryside through better planning in the 1920s, it was not until 1947 that the Planning Acts were passed. These are 20-year campaigns. They're not something you start today. In a world of social media where we post something today and we want an answer tomorrow, that is not the world that actually creates the sort of change that we need as campaigners. So, going back to my foreword in the book, just to tantalize you. One of the things I say in that is that I think that control, which is something that planning is all about, it's all about saying you can't do this or you have to ask permission to do that. And at the conference last week, we were debating whether that system of control needed to extend over the countryside, over the use of land more broadly. Should we have a planning system for land? But I've come to the conclusion that actually no form of planning control will ever get us where we need to be faced with the decline of nature and the climate crisis. We have seen in the 100 years that we've been in existence an attrition of the quality of the countryside. We have had fantastic wins over that time, but actually if we look out and we look coldly at what we look at, and the deserts that is so much of our agriculture, and the development is spoiling so much of our countryside, we haven't won this war. So I came to the conclusion that the only way we will win is through hearts and minds. That brings me back to that making emotional connections. I am quite sure that our way forward is not as a technocratic organisation, though we will support everything we do with good evidence, but as an organisation that wins people's hearts and minds through their love of the countryside to support measures that are going to save it and improve it. Lastly then, I'm sure I've gone on way too long. Anyway, had a lot to say this year. I just want to end with a few thanks. Firstly, I want to thank Roger and the team, some of whom are here today, for a fantastic job they're doing in their centenary year. Really, really brilliant. And I want to thank Roger particularly and personally for his inspirational leadership of the organisation, which has been absolutely phenomenal. So thank you, Roger. You can all. A couple more thanks before I leave the podium. I want to thank Mike Proctor, who is retiring this year, has retired, as the first chair of the National Assembly. He's done a great job. I have to say, this was not an easy one, because this was about forming this entity, which is this network bringing us all together. And he had two qualities, I think, that have made such a success of it. The first is he knew nothing about CPRE, really, which may sound an odd compliment, but in reality what it says is you weren't part of all the agendas and all the history that might have distorted your view. So he's been an absolutely rigorously fair and impartial chair over that time. So thank you for that. And the second thing I've admired most about you, Mike, is the way you've listened so much. You've been so willing to say, that didn't work, let's try something different. And that takes some doing when you're a chair, is to say, actually, maybe we haven't got this right, and give me some feedback and actually take it on board. So, Mike, thank you very much for 3 years of your work with us. I think Mike deserves it. And lastly, a couple of other things. I would like also to thank two of our national trustees who have retired or had to resign this year, William Donaldson and Matthew O'Connell. William, both interestingly, are in business, and they have both found it quite tricky balancing the demands of a full-time job with the voluntary activity of being a trustee. And everybody who is of that age and knows how difficult it is to balance it will be aware of that. But they both brought real insight and challenge to our work over the last year. And thank you also to all the people, the trustees out there who give their time within the network. Thank you to all the people who run Hedgerow Heroes. That's been a transformative, absolutely transformative project. And thank you to everybody here and online who've been running some great events for CPRE in our centenary year. And thank you to more generally to our supporters. Roger's going to tell you that Chelsea has led to a real spike in those who are interested in our work, which again brings me to that point of, I think we need to be confident. There are thousands and thousands of people joining us as our supporters who believe in the cause that we believe in. And I think, we can go forward with confidence from the centenary on. So thank you all very much. Right, so without having hopefully stolen his thunder, I'm now going to ask Mike, as departing chair of the Assembly, to deliver his final report on the work of the Assembly. Over to you, Mike.
Yeah, the important thing to notice on this badge is former. So the Walking Dead here, having retired as chair in May. Just to say a little bit about the year that's gone by. We're in the third year, I guess, of the Assembly, having been founded by Danny Garvey. We've developed in two ways, I think. Firstly, helping to facilitate better two-way information exchange between the centre and the network, so the centre can communicate its priorities to branch chairs and members more effectively. And also that the branches themselves can inform the centre about their priorities. Secondly, there is a forum for exchanging information between branches about their local initiatives. And I think that has developed over the last 3 years. And Simon has been very kind about my role. It's all been a joint effort with everybody contributing to trying to find the best format. We did have a survey last year among Assembly members to gauge its effectiveness. And the consideration of the results led to changes in the agenda for meetings, so that there are now, quote, matters of discussion papers which end with a poll to gauge support for various initiatives. So the idea is to get answers from the attendees to questions that the centre wants to know, apart from all the other things that are going on. We also have a new section called Local CPRE Projects, in which individual branches can talk about their various activities in which they're involved, and hopefully that will lead to some very useful sharing of information. And these changes seem to have been well received. The attendance at the quarterly meetings remains at a good level, although the meetings do take place during the working week and during the day, and this is clearly difficult for some attendees. And I imagine in the future there'll be continual thought about what the best timetable for these meetings is. So just a short list of the things that have been discussed over the last year. Housing, working together to influence government reform, devolution, strategic spatial plans and influencing strategic authorities, bringing the centenary to life, of course, findings from Working Better Together workshops, and then the questions which have come as a result of this change of tack. Should we explore the use of AI in planning and beyond? The answers to almost all these questions are yes, by the way. I think there's one rogue one where the answer is really no. But anyway, you can work it out. Are the future strategy framework discussions progressing well? What experience has there been with anaerobic digesters? And how should CPRE deal with their effects on the countryside? Should CPRE do more to support parish councils? That was a very interesting conversation. Can branches do more to increase members and supporters? And how should we campaign better for better planning of town and city edgelands? So all these were fascinating, and a lot of questions and back and forth. We've also had reports from the following CPREs: Devon, Peak Districts in South Yorkshire, Essex, Oxfordshire, Kent and Somerset. So that's just over the last half year, and we hope for many more reports in the future. So I think hopefully those who attend the Assembly, which is all online these days, think it's worth working. It is working well, and indeed attendances seem to have held up quite well. So, as Simon has said, I've now completed 3 years as Assembly Chair, formally stood down in May after the most recent meeting, and of course, as Simon has correctly said, I knew very little about CPRE when I applied for the position. I'm a recently retired academic. I've got considerable experience of chairing meetings. And I'm also, I should say that some of the meetings I chair are full of people who want to be heard and be damned to anybody else. Of course, the Assembly is much more polite than this, but you can see a sort of echo, maybe. So I've got a great interest in the future of the countryside because, as the son of a farmer who grew up there, so I expressed an interest, hoping that this experience of chairing, together with being an outsider with no axe to grind, and Simon has acknowledged this, and no baggage, would prove helpful. And I think I've managed to do that satisfactorily. And Simon has been very kind in thanking me for that. But I've really been impressed by the dedication of the people who volunteer so much of their time and energy to campaigns. This is not a part-time job. Some of you, I know, work round the clock to these very important matters to save the places that we all love, often in the place of difficult odds. So I really take my hat off to you for all the work that you do for very little reward. I've also learned a great deal talking to Simon, Roger and others, and I thank them very much for their fellowship and good advice over the period I've been in charge. I do think that now the Assembly is more mature, it might be better to have someone as the next chair who is more heavily involved in CPRE than I was. So I'm really pleased that the members have elected Andrew McRobb as chair to succeed me. I've really appreciated his help as the deputy chair over the last 3 years. And I'm sure that he'll carry the Assembly forward to new heights, Andrew, most effectively. And I wish you the very best in your new role. So a final thank you very much to all of you, to members and chairs over the last 3 years, and a quick response from Andrew. Thank you all very much.
Thank you very much. For those that don't know me, my name's Andrew McRobb. I'm a director and trustee of Herefordshire, and I was very fortunate to be elected as chair for the next Assembly, although having heard that it's better to be a chair with no knowledge, I'm a little bit concerned as to how I've been elected, but there we go. I'm stepping into some big shoes, and Mike has done an excellent job of leadership. He's demonstrated that the first 3 years of Assembly were really, really important. Assembly was born out of local branches and their desire to contribute, and that's one of the things that I'm very anxious will be the future, is to get the members of Assembly actually defining what it is that we're doing and giving us feedback on what they're doing. It's evolved as expectations and the complexity of work that we have to do in an ever-changing government and fast-evolving regulations. We all need to be part of adapting our organisations to meet the stresses of planning, landscape, community concerns, and continue to lead from the front, as we have for 100 years. Don't forget that. We've got to keep leading from the front. Taking on the role of chair, I want to fully support our emerging new strategy, which I think is absolutely critical. I want to build transparency between branches, the executive and trustees, and above all, I want to listen to all of your views. We all play vital and much needed roles, but often we're unaware of what goes on behind the scenes, of those people who you may not know and the contributions they make. I want to ensure the trustees know the mood of the branches and vice versa. Good communication is essential. My message is simple. Nothing stays the same. Together, we must be prepared to walk in one another's shoes. Pragmatism, consensus, and collaboration will be the road to a successful CPRE. This will be a CPRE that delivers for the countryside and future generations. I give you my pledge that that's what I'm going to try and achieve. Thank you.
Thank you, Andrew. And your experience is really important for the second phase. Anyway, good. Thank you both very much for that. Now, I'm now going to invite Marianne Orota to, as our president, to say a few words. And I would only say that she's just been amazing in terms of the time and energy that she has given us over the past year, and particularly in this centenary year. She's been great at articulating and communicating our cause to a broad audience, which is just what we need of a president. And if you haven't seen her Lego thing on planning on the YouTube, you should go look. Or is it on Instagram? I don't know which it's on.
It's on LinkedIn.
It's on LinkedIn. I think it's on Instagram. Go and just put her name in, you'll see it. Anyway, over to you, Marianne.
Thank you. So I possibly peaked with the explaining multifunctional land use with Lego, because even I was dead proud of it, sticking a kind of Duplo cow on top of a block that represented nature-rich farming next to a block that represented housing, on top of which there was energy infrastructure. And I was like, okay, well, look, that's pretty straightforward, isn't it? Everyone should just get behind the Lego model of explaining everything. Most of the work that I do for CPRE is looking and talking to the people out there rather than the people within the network and organisation. So it's always a great privilege to be here and spend time with you and genuinely just see the passion and the expertise and the talent that CPRE brings together to galvanise around the issues that really matter to us, but also crucially matter to the future, matter to the whole nation. Even if they don't realise that we're working for them, we are. Back in February, it was hard to remember a time. It was cold. It was cold. We were wearing fleeces. There was sort of slightly sideways rain. And I went up to join CPRE Cheshire, who were doing a hedgerow creation project with a young activist conservation group called Young Wilders. And there were also concurrent events being held, I think, down in Kent and... I've forgotten the other county. So a kind of network of hedge planting events. And it was around Hedgentine's Day. Sort of Valentine's Day, but hedges, because we love hedges, right? We love the countryside. And the thing that really blew my mind, going to plant hedge whips with a bunch of young people and a bunch of CPRE volunteers who were slightly less young, was how much common ground we had between us. Literally, because we were talking about the carbon sequestration, we were talking about the water, we were talking about nature, we were talking about how this simple act of cutting lines into the turf and sticking in this tiny little twig of hope in a line was something that really brought us together and brought us around not only sharing time together, caring for the countryside in a very visceral, tangible, dirt under your fingernails kind of way, but also in a way that fostered, that really rooted, literally rooted in our commitment to a future. Because for some of us, it's the same for whenever you plant anything, you might not be there to see it reach its full fruits, but you know that your action meant it has that potential in the future. And I think that's something that constantly comes back to me about the work that CPRE does. And it's writ even more clear in a centenary year that we have that. The beauty of a centenary is that you can both look forwards and look backwards. It's the two-headed nature of the turn. And I feel like Hedgentine's Day, my day out in the wind with the wild people, was fantastic. It filled my cup back up with the reason that we're doing this work. When it feels difficult, when it feels like you're not really getting traction, when people in government and Westminster aren't really listening. And I feel like just in the past couple of weeks, I know that there are questions over whether the new government will do a better job by the issues we care about or not. But I'm going to stick my colours to that flag and say, yes, this is a huge opportunity for us to reassert our role in shaping the national conversation and therefore the national direction of what our countryside will look like now, in 2 years' time, in 5 years' time, in 20 or 100. And I slightly disagree with Simon, that yes, some of this is a 20-year project, but some of it is a 2-month project. Some of it is us getting our ducks in a row and singing with full voice what it is that we stand for. Now, the work that a people-focused, ambitious, hope-filled government needs to work with are people who are hope-filled, purpose-filled and committed, who focus everything that they argue about, that they campaign for, that they care about, around what it means for the people and where they live, for people in the future and the landscape, the climate and the nature that they are going to rely on. That idea of a future generation, a sustainable way to live, means that we meet our needs now in a way that does not serve as a detriment to the ways that future generations can meet their needs in the future. So this government needs partners, and those partners need to be us. We need to bring our insight, yes. We need to bring those local grounded connections, which is where the network really brings a huge, incredible authenticity and truth to power reality that's grounded in your places. And we also need to bring our expertise. But, and Simon sort of touched on this, facts never convinced anyone of anything. We recently had a webinar about talking about the climate crisis that we face and how to galvanise people to take action as well. And we had speakers from Climate Outreach and speakers from Round Our Way, who are both expertise organisations in identifying what people actually think about the climate conversation and what are the levers to change conversation or an emotional response, be that denial, fear, excitement about possible new opportunities, into meaningful action that we can harness. And the thing that was clear from both those speakers, from Climate Outreach, from Round Our Way and from our own CPRE network, was that whatever we're talking about, we have to speak to where people are at right now, and we have to talk in ways that make them feel something, because facts never convinced anyone of anything. We decide what we want based on how we feel, and then either the facts support that or they're inconvenient. And it's much easier now, particularly, but it always has been the way. We are humans. We're not rational first. We're irrational, and then we kind of stick a bit of rationality on top sometimes, only when it suits us. So we have to talk in ways that galvanise a movement that helps people, that creates space for people to see themselves as part of us, part of the group, part of the movement, part of CPRE. And I'm really thrilled that collaborations with organisations such as Young Wilders, and I think you'll see it played out in action with our panel of young people in our CPRE networks, in shortly. You'll see how we can create spaces for diverse voices, for diverse people, so that people out there can see themselves reflected in this room, who can hear people who sound like them, who talk like them, who talk about things that matter to them in a way that makes sense to the whole CPRE conversation. Because the ambition and the confidence that Simon referenced is also really important, that we remind ourselves that everybody cares about this stuff. Whatever angle they're coming to the conversation with, ours is a place that they can find a home. So CPRE commissioned research with More in Common, the polling organisation. 91% of people think that the British countryside is special. But our challenge is that sometimes CPRE, we don't always talk about those issues that people do care about in ways that they recognise, that they see themselves reflected in. Sometimes we do. Sometimes we absolutely hit gold. The collaboration with Young Wilders, the London Tree Ring campaign, the Manchester Ringway, the CPRE Avon and Bristol concert that worked with a youth orchestra and community groups to not only create music, be creative, invite people in as audience, but also engage in tree planting. So that visceral dirt under the fingernails again. But also Hedgerow Heroes, which I think has reached all branches in one way or another. The Countryside Day, which is a huge success, which invites people into our conversations in a way that is fun. Because sometimes it is really technical, sometimes it is really hard, sometimes it's slightly boring, but important. But sometimes it can also be joyful and create space for people to come together in community and say, well, they're a good bunch, I'm going to volunteer. They're a good bunch, I'm going to become a member. They're a good bunch, I'm going to follow them on Instagram. So we have to appeal to heart as well as head. I absolutely second what Simon says, and talk to people about the things that feel visceral, that are not just the abstract or the technical, but the ones where if they close their eyes and you invite them to imagine the countryside of the future, they can smell it. They can taste it, they can feel it, they can see themselves in it. Because if we don't have a strong vision, literally something that you can visualize in your mind's eye, then it's hard to get people to really invest with their inner core. This bit gets engaged perhaps, but this bit sometimes gets left out. The way to do that is, as Simon has said, solutions, bring people in. Yes, we defend the countryside, but we do it through demonstrating good ideas and powerful examples. Just like in the past, we've championed national parks, the green belt as a tool for good planning, litter picking, small things, but ones that really make a difference to people in their local places, that they feel like they have a stake in, that they can do on a Tuesday afternoon after work. So what do those visceral realities look like now? Well, maybe it's a rooftop solar campaign, maybe it's community energy, maybe it's rural housing that makes sense to your local place, maybe it's brownfield first, but situated, local and specific. Because these are solutions that harness both the head that we're really, really good at, the evidence-based policy and information, the galvanizing of networks of experts, but it also speaks to hearts and minds. It's carefully considered evidence that builds the idea rather than instead of the idea. It's a thing that people can point to and say, yes, that's what I want. That's the parade I want to march in. That's the place I want to live in. That's the legacy that I want for my children or grandchildren. So the future Prime Minister, whoever they may be, the one we probably think it is, speaks in these local place-based ways, speaks in a way that he's there to serve, as a public servant, people. And so that is the story that we need to sell, because the reason that he's popular is because people see him and think that he speaks for them, for their interests. And why? Because he speaks to their hearts as well as their heads. So we need to sell to our local representatives, to our MPs, to our councillors, to our parish councillors, to our communities, whether they are currently involved with CPRE or whether they should be because they care about the things that we do and campaign for. It has to be a future of a countryside that we sell as positive, progressive and patriotic in a really inclusive way, as a place of thriving, resilient nature and community, a place where food and water and the future is farmed. I think it's really exciting. I think I came into 2026 feeling a little bit nervous and tired and worried about the future, but I feel like there is a genuine and huge opportunity, not just for our nation, but also for us as a charity, as a campaigning organisation, as guardians of the future. There's a lot of change. 2026 to 27, if you vote for me in a minute, will be my last year in my 3-year presidential term. And so I want to make it a really, really good one and serve CPRE as much as I possibly can, to have those conversations out there, to be able to champion you and the work that you do, to really lift up our volunteers, whether you're serving as a trustee, as a social media manager, as someone who's out there working with a young person on how to plant a hawthorn tree whip. Whatever it is, I hope that I can carry your stories into some of the rooms where I am fortunate to be invited and can say CPRE is your partner for progress, for a positive vision of the future. So there's a lot to do for all of us. And the next 12 months, I think, I kind of thought, well, how do I capture them? How do I capture them? I think it's 4 things. It's stories and solutions. I don't know what I did then. What does it say, Chas? Oh, yeah, okay, well, that fits. It's not my slide, but I agree. Stories and solutions. And it's also about us being hungry, about doing things differently, about saying we can do more, we can do it quicker, we can do it in a more joined up way and a more powerful way. And I think it's also fundamentally about being hopeful. This is about defending, but it's about defending with an eye on a positive, bright and beautiful future that I hope we all are here in the room to achieve. Thank you.
Good to see everyone. It's my slide, yeah. I just wanted to thank Simon and Marianne for their support, and also for the trustees. Also a lesson in life, which I never learn, which is don't tell anybody what you're going to say ahead of time, because they use some of your best lines. So I will skip through some of the things that have already been said. Of course, yeah. It just means we're thinking aligned, exactly. That's the thing to say. I'm going to look forward, and talk about our centenary a little bit. There's some things we haven't mentioned so far. But I did want to talk about Manchesterism and what it means for rural communities, because we've been thinking about it quite a lot. And I'm just going to talk really about the facts of the speech this week. So I want to start with the very current thing and some of the things that Andy Burnham did say, because I think this comes on the back of a government that so far has been rural blind, that has ignored rural communities, that has cast the debate that we're in as one of builders versus blockers, and very often demonised people who care about their communities. So like Marianne, I came into this year feeling pretty grim, actually. But in the speech this week, there's a few things I wanted to pick out. Place first in a government that so far has been place blind. Higher density residential development so that we can save green spaces and the countryside. Repairing of existing social housing and investing in new council housing in all areas of the country. And recognising that rural economies have a valuable role to play and that they need investment in rural transport. I'm not making any party political point here, but that's CPRE playbook stuff. So as there's going to be plenty of stuff that as it comes out in a wash, we're going to have some challenge with. But at the moment, that's a lot to get your teeth into. So the reason my window of opportunity is there is that we've had a rough go with this government so far. It's felt like putting your head in boiling oil on a good day. But I think we've got a chance for a window of opportunity. I wanted to say something else just about the network, actually. 3 years ago when I started, 3 and a bit years ago when I started, I spent a good third of my time managing internally. I don't think that's what you want me to do. I think I don't spend anywhere near my time doing that now, you'll be pleased to hear. I think the chance for us to come together, and instead of me putting out fires internally, to put some fires under other people, is there and for the asking. So I think both in terms of the organisational health as a network and these opportunities for change, I think we're in good shape. How do I make this go there? So, but it's been a grim old year, and I don't need to tell you that that it's been tough. And I think I always pick the standard method as one of those issues where I feel like I sort of will keep going on about the standard method till I'm blue in the face, because it just seems so unfair, is so not based on evidence, and all I get told by Matthew Pennicook is, you're the only person who cares about this, Roger, so stop talking about it. I know that's not true, because we represent a bunch of people who care about it, but it's been tough. I do want to talk about a couple of things where we've done, other people have mentioned these, but the sunshine bill. Sometimes you've got to remember your success. That we've been campaigning on rooftop solar for 5 years now, 3-4 years in earnest. That major win, it's a major win. All new homes from next year will have solar on their roofs. That's amazing. We've still got some really tricky stuff to do with warehouses, but that sense that the public doesn't want solar on huge areas of our agricultural land is now part of the psyche and part of the conversation. And that's because we've made it so. The sense that rooftop is a solution is in the psyche because we made it so. So let's not underestimate the power that we can have when we can come together. And I'm super looking forward to the moratorium on mega solar campaign we're going to be launching next year. Likewise, Hedgerow Heroes. It's one of those things we talk about like it just happens. 13 branches, 34 miles. You did that. It happened. People created something amazing. And that's why I'm delighted that yesterday, God, I've never worked like this ever in my career. Yesterday, the funder confirmed another year of funding and a willingness to keep on supporting us. So brilliant. That's not anything we're doing. That's you delivering amazing stuff on the ground, restoring and creating new hedgerows. So 10 branches got confirmed funding for next year. We'll keep the support of Lorraine, hopefully, to find new sources of money to keep that going. I also wanted to say there's been some big challenge, though. I think probably the one big challenge, I think, is on the grey belt proposals. I think we knew it was a rubbish idea on the first day it was announced. I think it's an existential threat to the green belt. I think we recognise that. It feels it's not just a nibbling of the edge. It's eating the whole cake in some instances. The report we did last year shows that 88% of appeals on grey belt applications, they were on farmland. They were on good quality farmland. They were on key wildlife sites. They were on places that people love. This is a ridiculous policy, and we've got to keep challenging it. We've got to find other people who agree with us on this. Likewise, I think we're making, again, I would put this in the going well. I think at the beginning of this Parliament, I think it was like, stop talking about brownfield. I'm bored of hearing about it. I think that we're making traction suddenly on brownfield again, and we're going to do a cracking report later in this year, looking at the real economics of brownfield land. The idea that it's cheaper to build on greenfield is absolute baloney. It's only cheaper for the developer. It's not cheaper for the state. The whole of the economy takes a hit when you build on greenfield because it doesn't take into account any of those additionalities. So in the same way, when we look to talk about the additionalities in agriculture, we've got to do that in the housing market too. I also want to talk about, actually one of the things I'm so proud of, nothing I've done, but the team has done. I did want to point out, particularly Ruth and Catherine, who've really kind of worked brilliantly on this. But we have been kissing some frogs on how do we get more people to join us as members. And I know this is one of those things you care about absolutely massively. And I'm always told to be very cautious in my optimism. So this is my cautiously optimistic, but actually I'm actually really excited, is that we have been trialing this digital direct recruitment and two-stage recruitment. And by two-stage means we get people into the funnel as supporters and then we phone them and get them to become members. And it's working. So for the first time in almost a decade, we've turned that tail around and we're not seeing a decline in our membership. So this year, just since March, we've got nearly 500 new members. Now, in previous years, it's been under 100. This is, there's always an increase to that with people who naturally join us. So this is because we've been investing in it and really working hard to think about what makes people put their hand up and say, I care about your stuff, and meeting them, as Mary Ann said, where you are. I think this is super exciting. I think we've finally found something that's working, and I think we need to keep building on it. I just want to touch on the centenary because we started with a plan on the centenary that felt a bit audacious. And I think in some ways, it's had some real high points, but the high points have been higher than I thought they might be. So I just wanted to touch on some of that. And of course, it's been about looking back. And you're going to hear from Matthew's work, which I found really inspiring, just to kind of power what happens in the future. But much more important is how do we tell our story freshly and in a new way to a new generation? And I think that's what the opportunity of the centenary has done. We did start with this polling. This has already been mentioned, but I think you've got to start with remembering what were you, why are you important? And the fact that 91% of people think what you do is important is a pretty big start. When you start looking at what people care about most in this country, it's the NHS, it's their families, it's the things that are closest to them. But the countryside always in all polls features pretty high up the list. So it was good to test that out. But the other thing is that, despite the rhetoric of builders and blockers, most people want more protection. What we're talking about sometimes feels like a long game, but it's what people want. So we have done, in the looking back, we had this amazing exhibition, which I think I'll come on to talk about Matthew's book in a second, but we also did the look forward with this book. And if you haven't, there's a copies at the back, actually, salesman job slightly, but to get a bunch of writers who are the sort of people, when you walk into Waterstones, you see all those books on the table, to come to write about their vision for the future of the countryside, I found genuinely exciting as a way to bring people together. But the highlight so far, I think, must be the garden at Chelsea. I mean, I don't even think for the people who went. It was amazing if you went. And, I will never forget, standing with Judi Dench in tears, who can't see a thing anymore, as the guy who carved the guy ahead described how beautiful it was. But all that stuff that Simon and Mary Ann have talked about the emotional connection, is absolutely right. People were coming to the garden and not just connecting to what CPRE stands for, but absolutely from the heart and not the head. And I do want to thank the volunteers who made that week so special, because, when you're 7 deep in a crowd with people coming to look at the garden, the people who had in a very hot day sometimes, the skill and the battery power to stay through for the whole day really needs some praise. But it was an extraordinary day. But one of the things that made it extraordinary is the reach it gave us. And we needed these events, and we're using all the events in the centenary to get to more people. I think somebody said, this centenary is about being famous. So that's what we were trying to do. And so suddenly we saw these huge spikes in our media activity. Our Instagram followers increased by 20%, in a matter of weeks. That's insane. You just don't get that. We've got great coverage on Instagram. But the thing that made it, I think, and all the people who worked around the Chelsea Flower Show said, this never happens. Charities have a good time, but they don't have this synergy between their cause and what the garden says. And I think this is really important for us. So the fact that we launched this On the Edge campaign as well, a lot of the coverage we got wasn't just about the flowers in the garden, or rather the weeds in the garden. It was about It was about the message. It was about the vulnerability of our edgelands. You know, our edgelands are a national disgrace. If you drive out of any town, what do you see? You see a couple of box parks. You see some terrible housing, and you see some poorly underused industrial sites. You know, so shining a light on how poorly we think about those edgelands between our towns and cities really resonated with people. And not only would they join us and come to us, that 40,000 new people coming to us as supporters since March. We also trialled our mapping technology for the first time this year. So for the first time, we've been working with this map so that people could say, I care about the stuff here. And they put that on a map. I think Ellie and I were a bit worried it would fall flat. But actually, all the people in the country showed that it was brilliant. So we had, our first outing, we had 2,500 stories, people telling us what really mattered in their place. And I think that way of using digital, both through that kind of, I'm keen, let me join you, but also through the, what can I do to help, is going to be a really big theme for us going forward. And just some lovely things about the garden, I won't dwell on them, but I think plays to that idea that people are saying, you're working on stuff that has a real connection with what I care about. We might not always be using the language that connects with them, but the emotion of it connects. So we're about halfway through our centenary journey, so I'm just going to whip through what's coming. One of the things I wanted to say was about Matt's book, and you're going to hear a lot from Matt later, so I'm not going to steal any thunder. But one of the things that have struck me about Matt's book is the need to think big and be radical. There's some people in that book who have been my heroes for a long time. People like Marion Short, who wrote The Theft of the Countryside. People like Fiona Reynolds, our vice president. People like Robin Grove White, who's been a long time superhero of mine. But these are not people who pushed paper around when they were doing these jobs. They were people who had, Abercrombie as well. The people had a vision for doing stuff differently. They weren't just thinking in a box about what the countryside meant. They had a really big and exciting sense of what newness meant and how they could reinvent that sense of the countryside. And I think in a way, the looking back bit, which for me is encapsulated in Matt's overview of our history, has inspired me more and more about our future, because those examples to think big. In Marion Short, in The Theft of the Countryside, she says things that are almost radical to the point that, the most radical thinkers in the country still aren't saying those things now. Let's revisit the fact that we were founded with an amazingly important mission and with some really big ideas. So re-inhabiting those big ideas is important. The next thing that's coming up is Love Your Countryside, and there's some brilliant resources coming your way in a matter of weeks out to all branches. And I do want to praise the comms team and the work that Verity's done in just getting ahead of the curve, really telling our story well. But at the centre of our centenary was an invitation. And the invitation was to love your countryside. And so using that work that came from CPRE Sussex, broadening that kind of approach, and people doing these amazing events. I'm really delighted we've got, we've had this fund, over £100,000 we've distributed to branches, 24 people have got grants. Look at all those amazing things that have happened and are going to happen. Most of them are happening in September around this Love Your Countryside event. And as people have said already, that Bristol event at the Bristol Beacon, full, massive concert hall, full of a young orchestra telling a story of the countryside to a new generation. The ambition of the London Tree Ring, an M25 of trees around the capital. This isn't a small project. This is us working at scale, delivering something quite extraordinary. So I want to talk a little bit, just to finish, about our strategy. And we've been working on this, and I've been updating through the Assembly for the last 6 months or so. But I think we've got something really special, and there's a sort of draft of where we've got to at the back. So I'm just waiting, because we printed them specially for today. And this is, I guess, the network launch. We'll have a proper launch in to the world in October. So there's some time for finessing. But I want to start with how we work together. because that's really critical. If we're going to be rather than putting fires under each other, we're putting fires in the world, then we need to work differently together. And we've identified these 4 areas. We've got going on 2 of them. Mark's been leading with Andrew on shared services. It feels like that's got some real steam behind it now. How can we do stuff together better? We've started to think about this upstream influence. And I think when we go back to some of that Manchesterism thinking, let's not wait until the ideas hit us and we have to respond to them. Let's try and influence the ideas. So this idea of upstream thinking, I think, is going to be so critical for us. Too often, we're dealing with the consequences of some stupid thinking that was 2 years old by the time we object to it. Let's try and get ahead of the curve. And then this autumn, we'll launch 2 more areas. One on how can we do national campaigns differently? How can we work with you so that stuff coming out from us doesn't feel like a surprise, but feels like a joint endeavour? How can we do how can we build on that amazing success we've had of members and supporters together? How can you help us get new supporters into the mix? So we've got these 5 things, but really 3 externally facing things that we've been working with you all on. So I hope these aren't a surprise. But a kind of framework for the next 10 years that focuses on this scaffolding, let's stop the loss of the countryside, especially where it just is madness and doesn't make any sense. While there's still 1.4 million brownfield sites to build homes on, why aren't we doing that first? So let's proudly say that we're about stop the loss, but we also want to see a really good quality countryside. We want to see great regenerative farming. We want to see a countryside that responds to the climate crisis. And as people have already said, we can't do any of this unless people care. We've got another centurion, David Attenborough. And one of David Attenborough's great lines that you would have heard is, people will never act for the thing unless they care about it. And I think we've got to have that almost like they should be the other way around. We should start with 3. Unless we start with everyone caring, we haven't got a hope to do the others. And the things in the orange are the things we have to do internally to get right. So we've got to grow our support. And we've got to work better together. And I think if we can get those things right, I've just been delighted about how this framework seems to be landing and how it could help us to work together. I think the bit we need to do between now and Christmas is to add some real ambition for what does that mean in the first 3 years? What things are we actually going to do? Simon's mentioned the restructure. So it's a really tough time for us at National in terms of refocusing the organisation. So at the top line, we're trying to, give ourselves more campaign impact, working on that engaged movement of supporters and working with you in a different way. That means, sadly, working so that we've refocused some roles. We're in a collective consultation at the moment. I know I've given a briefing to you now. These are just proposals at the moment. And once we're out of that and there's some clarity, I'll let everybody know. We're also moving office at the end of the year. This is all about us reducing costs so that we can kind of finally work within our means and be able to respond to the challenges in a much more focused way. So, as I say, we've got from now until Christmas to really focus these plans. At the moment, there's a lot of things moving around. I really hope we keep that rich strand of work we've had about young people going. I really hope we can work with artists and creatives much more proactively, because I think, as we've found out with Chelsea, it just tells our story much more powerfully. And I think there's loads to do around the climate change in the countryside. It seems to be madness that the only debate about climate change in the countryside is currently where do you put solar panels. And I think we've got to make that a much, much richer debate. I just wanted finally to thank the team because this work all powers, because a brilliant group of people at National work really, really hard to make this stuff happen, and I'm very proud to work amongst them. So I did want to thank them, and especially to the people, to Jenny and to Sandra, who've made today happen, and everybody else. There's loads of people who've made today happen. But to finish off with, we do this because we believe it's worth it. I think some of the most important things of work we've got to do is still ahead of us. 100 years has been an incredible moment, but we've got some chunky stuff to get on with, and I look forward to doing it together. Thank you.
Thank you, Roger. That was brilliant. And we didn't steal any of your good lines. They weren't anywhere near as good as your lines, so thank you. Right, so look, in the interest of keeping to time, what I'm going to do, and I know there's lots of us talking at you, but rather than break into questions now, what I'm going to propose is that we take the Treasurer's report next, and then we can have an allotted period of time which gets us back on track as far as the timing is concerned. So Emily Tate, our Treasurer of 1 year standing, unfortunately can't make it, demands of her work, but she's done a brilliant job as our Treasurer for the last year. And so I'm going to ask Mark Cornish to deliver her report. Mark.
Thank you, Simon, and good afternoon, everyone. So Simon, Marianne and Roger have talked about the year 2025 in pictures and words. I'm going to now do it in numbers, so hold on to your seats. How did we do? Well, overall, 2025 was a good year. We set our budget, which is the column on the right-hand side. We were looking at £4.7 million of income, and we got just over 5. We planned to spend 5.4, and we spent 5.3. So overall, the net result was we'd spent more than we got, but that was a planned reduction of money from our reserves of just under £900,000. Now, as you can see, that wasn't quite as good as the previous year, but primarily the previous year was driven by really good legacy income. We were fortunate to have 2 or 3 very large legacies in 2024. Still, legacy income in 2025 was good at 1.8 million. The long-term average is around about 1.5, 1.6 million. That's a sort of 10, 12-year average. So it was slightly higher last year. I'll look at the other lines in a bit more detail now. So non-legacy income. As you can see there, the membership income and regular giving is the net result. So that's after branch share. So one of the reasons why that was lower than the previous year was that we paid out more to branches by about £50,000, because if you know the branch share rules, after 3 years, whoever recruits then shares the money. So that was higher. We are still struggling with the effects, or we were last year, of the sort of cost of living crisis. We have still have a number of cancellations. So the membership numbers were going down. As Roger's mentioned, 2026, we seem to have turned a corner with that, with our advertising campaigns. Major donors was better than the previous year, not quite as good as the budget, and that's primarily the President's Circle that we'd launched. So that was new beginnings, so we're looking to build on that. Trusts and corporates were both better than budget and last year, and that was primarily from the Hedgerow Heroes work. We were given an extra lot of money for the centenary to really push forwards to the 100 miles of hedges. And other income and appeals also performed well, both in terms of budget and compared to last year. In terms of expenditure, we spent more than last year. The countryside next door, that was a combination of more expenditure on Hedgerow Heroes, because we'd obviously received more. But it's also spending down some of our restricted funds. So that's money that we'd been given in previous years for work to carry out on specific projects. So some of it was Nancy Bateman on our planning work. And we also transferred some designated money to North Yorkshire and CPRE Rutland, which were the funds for the former Lincolnshire branch, as they now merged. So these were funds we were holding on behalf of other branches, and we've transferred those to them now. Future countryside increased because of our work on the public campaigns, the production of our centenary books, and on the Edge project, which Roger mentioned earlier. as well as the funding for the centenary projects. As Roger mentioned, that was 108,000. In terms of building our movement, that was partly we've started a knowledge transfer partnership with Bayes Business School. So that was the setting up of that to try and develop alternative commercial sources of income for CPRE. Raising funds, we spent less than previous years. That was partly due to capacity within the team, due to long-term sick. So we just didn't have the staff at the time to do some of that work. Looking at our balance sheet, it's a very strong balance sheet. Most of the fixed assets are investments. We've also got quite a healthy cash reserve as well. Debtors are primarily legacy debtors. So as you can see, it went up in 2024 when we had those big legacies, but they have converted into cash within 2025. So we end up with, if you look at the bottom half, our split of funds. So overall, we've got 7.8 million. 1 million of it is restricted, so it's given by funders for specific purposes, such as Hedgerow Heroes or the planning work. We've also allocated 1.5 million for designated purposes, so some of it's to do with the centenary, office move, a whole range of sort of projects. And that left us with 5.3 million of unrestricted reserves. Now, we're given money to spend on our charitable purposes, but we are expected to keep a certain amount in reserve to deal with risks. So the trustees have agreed a reserves range of 1.9 to 3.6 million, and that's how this is broken down. So we need a chunk of money for working capital, so between 400 and £1 million. So that's the sort of best case, worst case. Legacy income, as we've touched on, is a very big stream of income. If that doesn't come, and some years it doesn't materialise to the extent that it has in recent years, so 2021, for example, our legacy income was 900,000. So we can have some big variations in legacy income. So we keep some in reserve to help us manage that risk over the short term. Not only is the legacy income erratic in terms of the size of it, it's also erratic in terms of when it turns into cash, because a lot of these legacies relate to property, which take a long while to convert into cash. So we keep some aside to fund that balance. And then we also keep some things amount aside for unplanned events. And particularly cyber security is one of those things that unfortunately lots of companies are attacked, and charities are no less target than commercial organisations. And it's not just the impact on the system, it's the sort of PR effects that we're trying to mitigate against those. So unplanned events like those, we've kept some money aside. So if we look at the trend of our unrestricted reserves against those parameters, you can see we started off this decade slightly above the effect of the legacies, and the higher costs that we had in 2021 meant that we were rapidly going down towards the bottom end of the reserves. We took action in 2022 to address that, and we've been fortunate in 23 and 24 to have some high levels of legacy income, which have then taken us back up over that upper limit. So with the board, they've designated some of the existing reserves, and we've got plans for others, which I'll talk through in a minute. But the idea is to get that back down to within the red and the green line, to within that parameter. Just to sort of strip out the effect of legacies and why we've had to do this sort of reorganisation. If you strip out the legacy, the excessive legacy, so that's over the long-term average of 1.5, over those years, the dotted line shows where our reserves would be. So we've been very fortunate, but we can't rest on our laurels, thinking that's going to happen every year. So we can't use one-off legacies to fund ongoing repeat costs, because if they don't turn up, the legacies, then we are start getting into a mess. So that's just to really highlight the dramatic effect that legacies do have on our results. As I mentioned, the board have identified some priority areas from these reserves going forward. So part of the restricted money that we've got in our balance sheet is from Nancy Bateman to use for support of growth, which we're using this year. It's a 4-year programme, and we've agreed to match that funding from our own reserve. So that gives us sort of 800,000 in total. We've identified some other programmes, as you can see there, of where we might want to invest some of those reserves. They're not detailed plans at the moment. They're sort of areas that we might want to consider, and we will work with the board to work up detailed, specific plans and get sign-off on those over the next year or so. So how's this year gone? We started this year with a budget deficit of £500,000. So as you can imagine, that's based with the long-term average of the 1.5 million legacy income you can see. That's a big deficit to not address, which is why we've taken that decision to look at our costs in this year. So far, the year has started quite strong, both in terms of legacy income and non-legacy income. Again, we've had a couple of larger legacies which have helped us get to that 1.7 million. And we've been successful with some grant applications, Hedgerow Heroes Part 6, and the Nancy Bateman money for the membership plan. So we've had a good start to the year, but it doesn't change the fundamentals of the underlying issue of this reliance on legacies. So the priorities that we're working on: complete the reorganisational design in this quarter. As Roger said, we've got the office move. So these are our two biggest costs are the office and staff, and both we're trying to reduce the overall amount, but also make the cost more flexible. So instead of going to another office that we commit to a lease for 5 years, we've gone to service office, or we're going to service office where we can flex up and down the costs in the future. Again, we're going to develop that investment plan for the reserves to capitalise on this centenary year. In terms of CRM, we want to work with those pilot branches to really make sure that local CRM app and the data quality is spot on before we roll it out further to the other branches. So that's really all that I wanted to say. Thank you, Simon.
Good. Thank you, Mark. Thank you for that. So we have a few minutes, not wanting to truncate the next session, which is our Young People's Panel. But if anybody does, either online or in the room, have either observations on anything you've heard to date, or any questions you'd like to ask any of the team, we're here to answer. If you can put your hand up and wait for a microphone, otherwise nobody will hear it online. So, any thoughts? Yes, John, can we have a... Thank you, Sandra. Hang on, John. Just wait for the... Thanks.
It's a question for Mark, actually, on legacy pipeline. You showed in the kind of budget for 2026, we've got another windfall year on legacies, based on the amounts already excess of our budget. Is there much left in the pipeline for the remainder of the year? So could our reserves rise by another 1 million or so, and maybe give us some other options on reorganisation?
The pipeline at the moment is about 300,000 that we're aware of, so it's not massive. So, yeah, it's 300,000. So it's, you know, some of the ones that we knew about have come in and have been replaced, but we have had, I think there's 2 that we didn't know about that have just come in out of the blue. So it's not, it's not a massive pipeline.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else? Yes, Judith. Down the front, Sue, or here we come, coming from your right, Judith.
Judith Cobham-Lowe, Chair, CPRE Warwickshire. First of all, fantastic to hear such an upbeat report after so long of having to be really concerned, and that's, I think, given us all a new lease of life. Good. The thing I specifically wanted to ask about was you each mentioned solar, whether mega or rooftop, which is great, but you seem very quiet on car parking solar. A couple of weeks ago, I flew back through Montpellier Airport, and the whole of the airport parking, including everybody's hire car operations, are all under solar. And I don't understand why we're not shouting about this when we're having to give up countryside to particularly these monstrous mega developments.
Yeah, no, absolutely. We would agree, Roger.
Oh yeah, I think absolutely. The government have made it clear in the solar roadmap just in the last month that they're not prioritising car parking. So there's a campaign in that to kick back. We want to first work on the moratorium on mega solar first, because I think that's where the heat is amongst branches. But car parking is another great campaign to follow on from that.
We're going to get the mega solar because we've not.
Absolutely, yeah.
Doing what they do so successfully in France and a lot of Europe.
Exactly, we've been really pushing the France example. Yeah.
Sure. Yeah.
I think as well as the regulatory stick, there's also the "are you a good company" carrot that we can leverage on something like car park solar, because it's so visible and so immediately comprehensible to someone who has maybe 45 seconds of attention that they want to give us. So I think there's both the thing that CPRE does well, which is lobbying along the kind of, the hallowed halls of power, but something that we have as a movement of the people, which is having those conversations with local companies who want to not be the bad guys. And actually, sometimes that's kind of where the traction can put pressure on a government and go, actually, we won't get massive lobbying pushback because this looks like good people doing the right thing and that we're in front of the winning parade, which is generally, I discover, what politicians want to be.
Thank you, Marianne. Yes. Sue.
Thank you. I'm Charles Green from Shropshire. I'm planning spokesman, treasurer, vice chair. A couple of questions, one for Mark, one for Roger. Mark, with my accountant's hat on, I spent a lifetime presenting figures. You've presented the reserves figures with a 5-year table. Is it possible to do that in future for income as well? Because I'm aware that showing just the bare comparative figure, one figure goes up, it goes down again next year. It's good to see the trend, so that's just a plea for next year. Roger, I've been a member of CPRE for nearly 40 years. I've been an active member for nearly 20 years, so I can see the long-term trends. I'm pleased to know that in our centenary year, we're getting to grips with working together with the network. It's only taken 100 years to get to that stage. But I fully endorse the fact that people have said your leadership and the leadership team is inspirational, and we've seen today how articulate it is as well. So, Roger, how long do you think you can continue in your role of inspiring us?
That's a nice one. Yes. The first one was an observation. Mark, do you want to respond? On that income point.
Oh, it was the mic.
Yeah, certainly I can do that for next year, add the income to that graph, that's not a problem.
Yeah, okay. And I won't ask Roger to really respond to that one. A long time. We have to be nice to him. Yes.
Hello, Sarah Cook here from Staffordshire CPRE. You've mentioned quite a few times grey belt through the presentations, and it's certainly come up with our local councillors in our county meetings. And I was just wondering what your next steps is in this area, and if we could report back to our councillors who are looking for support, what National are doing.
Yep. Roger.
Yeah, so we have, I'm looking at Ellie just to make sure I've got this right, but we did our first review of how grey belt is working last year to really demonstrate that the government's aspirations that this would all be on petrol stations and car parks was just not right, and that it was having the opposite of the impact that they had claimed it was going to have. And in a way, I think the story is going to be a lot worse this time. So we're planning to do that again. So the big moment is I think the brownfield story is also part of the grey belt story. So I think, two things we're planning for the autumn. One is to revisit the grey belt work, to show that it's not working, and hopefully with a new administration to kind of look at the real flaws in it and to, pragmatically to tighten up the rules. My heart says we need to keep saying it's dumb, it should go, and that's the way we should approach it. I think the brownfield work I feel really excited about, because if we can show figures that show the Treasury that building on greenfields costs the state more, then I think we're in a whole new ball game of influence. So I think that bit, can turn the tide. The other thing I would say is, and I'm sure I'm looking at Lindsay, but of all the mayors, Burnham's been pretty good on the green belt. Maybe Sadiq Khan has sort of sold it down the Swanee a bit this year, but I think there is something about devolution and saying to mayors, we need to work hard on the devolutions, the opportunity of devolution. And I think the fact that Andy Burnham sees the value of the green belt is something that's really worth leaning into, because I tell you what, nobody in the current number 10 or Treasury teams have ever seen the value in the green belt.
Yeah. Ellie, do you want to add anything? No? Okay. I mean, just an interesting reminder, though, in that fact that if we do this work that makes the economic case, that facts work alongside the emotional arguments. It's not about throwing one out in for the other one. It's our combination of those two things has always been our great strength of having strong messaging supported by solid research. Anybody else? Sorry, I can't see. Oh, yes, sorry, yes.
Hello, I'm Sally Green. I'm from Shropshire CPRE and handmaiden to Charles Green here. So I provide the endless coffees and teas. And
We've seen you on screen occasionally. Yeah.
Yeah. But he tells me off. No, it hasn't been mentioned here, but for new projects, and I've already said something to Roger about this, the lady over there mentioned Montpellier and it's a very good education to go to the continent. Since the last 10 years we've left the European Union, and notice that we are falling behind in many ways. And the thing that really gets me, and I'm sure most people in this room, is the litter along our main roads. You come out of an airport, if you've gone to collect someone, and the first thing you see as you come out of the airport is the litter along the A road, especially in the winter when there is the vegetation. Please, 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 can CPRE highlight this as a campaign for the future? I gather there is an anti-litter campaign group, but we don't hear from them. And I think if this isn't a CPRE thing to campaign on, nothing is. People will probably agree with me that the litter is a national disgrace. And I think if we could get James Dyson to get a very powerful sucking vacuum cleaner to go along the motorways perhaps once a week and suck up all the junk that people throw out of their windows.
It'd be better if they did.
We'd all be happier.
Yes. Okay.
Is that
Thank you.
Right?
Yes. I mean, I think, yes, And you know that CPRE has long been involved with campaigns against litter in this country. I mean, I think at the moment, though we still hold it and local groups do a lot of litter picks, communal litter picks. And yeah, exactly. I think part of the point around the strategy is about honing in on a few really key campaigns where irreversible change is likely to happen to the countryside. So if you don't hear us talking about it, it is because of making the focus in these other few really areas where we want to have an impact. Doesn't mean it's off our radar, but I think we won't be lifting it as a major campaign. Would that be right, Roger?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it's in the mix.
It's in the mix. It's in the mix of the general activity. Okay, right. Anybody else? John from Derbyshire. He didn't say who he was, but here you are. John Newtibby.
Just a couple of quick things. In terms of branding, I had an email the other day talking about rebranding again. Could we not just add a plus sign to the centenary branding and stick with that for a few more years? And the second observation I wanted to make was, you've teased us, Roger, about a campaign for mega solar for 2027. What other things have we got up our sleeves for next year? Because I know you look a bit further ahead than our previous CEO. Thank you.
A quick one, Roger.
Yeah, I think the mega moratorium is this year, so you don't have to wait too long. I think on the branding, the hard work on the branding's been done. We're just going to take the 100 off. So there you go. That's easy. And thank you. I mean, a good example of co-creation is that finding a way through on the branding, which can normally kill federations quite quickly, has been done so well because a group of you got involved to make it really easy. So I think also we've had Ellie's leadership, which has really helped. But I think we're in a good place on the branding. I think the only debate is about whether we stick with the gold or not. So I think those kind of things we can manage. So I think that's on branding. On campaigns for next year, I think there's lots of things brewing, as you would hope. The one that I think I am really, really keen that we do, the Climate Change Committee launched their adaptation report a few months ago. Marianne and I went. If you look at where climate change will hit this country hardest, it's in poorer, rural communities, many of them coastal, whose lives will be impacted in a way that we cannot imagine. And so thinking about how we respond to that and how we think about where we're going to grow our food, how will we think about land and housing and all the things we need in a different way, given those existential threats that are coming our way. It's too late to turn it around completely. So we're in an adaptation zone. And I think us doing something with some big partners, including the Climate Change Committee, would be a really exciting thing for us to do. So I think that is, if I were to say what's coming in 27, I think something we can do together about that. Honestly, that map is terrifying. Go and, if anyone hasn't look at it, look at the Climate Change Committee's adaptation report. Places like, the East Anglian coasts, places like Devon and Cornwall, places like the Northeast Coast and the Northwest Coast, like they change for good unless we start to work now in a different way. So I think that's where we'll be.
And adding to that, though, one of the things that we've said is that it's not about chopping and changing. I've always been very clear that we need to stick to a few major campaigns and see them as continuing on so that they get real traction. We've rather been guilty about flopping from this campaign to that campaign to a new one. So I think that we must put it within the framework of our existing campaigns. Right, Ros, anything from your end? Okay, good. I'm going to wrap up at that point. So now formal business begins. That was just preamble. Whoops. Go on, sorry. Right, so the first one we have to is the adoption of the trustees' annual report and financial statements for 2025. Just reminder that it's only voting in the room, and voting members have cards unless they have also cards given to them as proxy, and I have a number. 3 parts to each vote, yes, no, abstain, and I'll take each, and then I'll announce the result at the end. Okay, so voting members, please. Adoption of the report and accounts for 2025. Those in favour, please raise your cards. 23. And those against, any abstentions? No. Okay, thank you very much. Carried unanimously. Moving swiftly on, we need to, there's a resolution to appoint the auditors, and this is to propose Sayer Vincent LLP as CPRE's auditors. Again, 3 parts. Those in favour? Those against? And any abstentions? No, good, thank you, carried. Third resolution, well, it's going down as 5 here, but anyway. Third resolution is fixing the auditor's remuneration, which is a responsibility of the board. So those in favour, please agree. Those against, and those wishing to abstain, carried. Thank you very much. Next resolution relates to Mary Ann being elected. So she's got to leave the room at this point. That's a very plaintive look, by the way, which says, please vote for me. So this is a resolution to propose that Mary Ann be elected for her 3rd year as president of CPRE. And as I'm sure you've seen, she's doing a sterling job on our behalf. So those in favour, please raise your cards. Against? And any abstentions? No, good, right. Thank you. Unanimous. It was a close one.
It would be so embarrassing.
I know, wouldn't it?
Never do that to me.
No, it was unanimous. Right. Next resolution then, to elect the chair of the Policy and Campaigns Committee, one of our trustees, Tony Burton, who unfortunately can't be with us today, but does an absolutely sterling job. I mean, really, his insight and connections and his intelligence have been remarkable for CPRE, Director of Policy for CPRE several years ago. Anyway, I'd invite those who would like to vote in favour of that election to raise your cards, please. Anybody against? And any abstentions? Very good. Thank you very much. That one's also carried. And that's the end of the elections, you'll be pleased to know. Is there anybody who wants to raise any other business today? Anybody? No? Happy? Okay, good. And nobody online, Ros. Good. Okay, so we move swiftly on then, having caught up a little bit by doing that very quickly. Panel.
Yes.
Okay, so we're going to move on to the next agenda item. We'll rearrange the chairs a bit when we are going to have a panel discussion with 4 younger people.
Okay, so thank you so much. This is the panel about how younger people are making an impact at CPRE. Of course, like many charities, CPRE has to face the fact that we have an ageing demographic of volunteers, trustees, supporters and members. And our movement isn't yet representative of the nation or the countryside that we're working to protect now and into the future. So we know that we need more young people in the movement to ensure that our work is relevant, that it's impactful, that it's empowering. So what better way to share our best practice and exchange learning than by inviting some of the young people who are already involved with CPRE to tell us about their work, their experiences, and perhaps to give us some advice on what we need to do more of, or perhaps a little bit less of, in order to accelerate that change. So I'm absolutely thrilled to be able to sit in conversation with these 4 fantastic young people, and absolute credit to it sounds very self-aggrandizing, but well done us for having such brilliant people in our network. Okay, so first of all, let's start off. Please each tell us your name, your role, and what you do with CPRE. Fran, let's start with you.
My name is Fran Hughes and I am Website and Social Media Manager for CPRE Northamptonshire.
Thank you.
Hi everyone, I'm Ryan. I'm from CPRE Derbyshire and Nottinghamshire and I'm a trustee.
I'm Stephanie and I'm an engagement trainee with Friends of the Lake District.
My name's Naomi Walker. I'm a nature recovery officer and leading on the Hedges and Edges project at Friends of the Lake District, the Cumbrian sort of arm of CPRE.
Fantastic. So we've got 2 volunteers and 2 staff members. Fran, let's start with you. What motivated you to first get involved with CPRE Northamptonshire?
I wanted to get involved with CPRE Northamptonshire because I live on the Edgelands area of our town and I could see that the countryside was being encroached upon, and I think it's important to not be a bystander to that. So I started to think about how I could get involved, local community groups I could participate in, and I felt that working on the website and social media with my background in journalism and communications was the most natural way to use those skills and get involved.
And had you heard of CPRE before? How did you actually find out about the charity in the first place?
I'd heard of CPRE, but I wasn't aware of our local branch until I started seeking out local opportunities.
Okay, so tell us about the social media platforms that CPRE Northamptonshire run and some of the posts maybe that you feel have really cut through and made an impact.
We have a Facebook page and an Instagram page. Across both, the posts that have really had the most reach and engagement have been the most localised ones that people can feel they can relate to and get involved with, whether that's community events, either organised by us or partner organisations in the community, or planning that we are opposed to do with mega solar farms and warehouses. We've got a big response when we have posted about that, either individually, us as an organisation, or supporting local groups, because sometimes people already feel opposed to it, but they don't know what to do about it or how they can get involved. So it's just sharing that guidance and local information that I think leads to quite high engagement.
Do you think that there's an appetite as well for seeing some of the solutions, the kind of the what good looks like in our place?
I definitely think so. I think it can feel overwhelming and a bit paralysing at times to see all the change happening, particularly if it's change that you personally don't agree with. But I think action is a good way to handle that and to feel like you're taking an active approach rather than a reactive one, and also meeting and getting to know like-minded people who are trying to create change in the area.
And when you're drafting those social media posts, do you have a kind of a list of banned words or words that you kind of, how do you choose the language? How do you land those messages?
I wouldn't say I have any banned words necessarily, although I try to keep the tone professional and accessible, thinking about the range of different audiences that we have across our platforms, and also that they could be shared. So we have some teachers that follow us and local educational groups, so it's important for me that the children and young people can understand them, engage with them as well, so that any technical information that we are sharing is more an extra, like a link to a PDF or something on our website, rather than that initial information people see. Because although that's important to have that detail, it could be a bit overwhelming at first.
Yeah, sell it on the headline first and then provide a route to get the technical report. What are you most proud of so far in your work with the branch?
I think I'm most proud of how it's changing how people are feeling. Like I was saying earlier, people that are feeling a bit lonely or downhearted in regards to their views with certain planning that is happening in the local area, and realising that there are other people that are opposed to it too, and want to do something about it rather than just talking about it. It's lovely to see the sense of community that it's creating, and the change that is happening, not just in terms of the posing things, but also the things that it's creating in the area, local nature groups, local nature walks, people gathering to not just oppose the destruction of the countryside, but to also celebrate everything that is good about it.
Yeah, that CPRE is a place to feel less alone with the grief. Yeah, and actually translate that into action. Amazing. Thank you, Fran. Ryan, you're a trustee for CPRE Derbyshire and Nottinghamshire. Why did you want to get involved as a trustee in the first place?
Yeah, so I moved from Cheshire to Derbyshire, and I love being in nature, and I wanted to really feel part of nature, not just in it. I wanted to understand nature so I can support nature, and also be in a community as well of like-minded people. So I wanted to be a trustee as part of my development with work anyway. I was encouraged by my CEO at the time. And I came across it while looking for it, and it was having a chat with John, who is the chair who's here today. And he made it very clear that they were looking for younger people, and made me feel like I wasn't an imposter. And like, why me over more experienced people? He really made it feel like we were after younger people, younger trustees who can support CPRE for many years. So that's why. And what was your kind of first walking through the door, or that first trustee meeting? What was that experience like? Yeah, it could be quite daunting, but John was very aware that I'm obviously younger and maybe not experienced being in those rooms, those environments, in those meetings. So he prepped me on how it runs, how meetings run, went through the agendas and the minutes of the previous one, so I understood how they run and what my involvement is, encouraged me to speak up and also listen, and made sure that I had a voice in the room, and that was really important. So yes, it was daunting, but it was very reassuring by the end because I felt I belonged there. So that kind of supported, mentored space so that you could find your feet. Yeah. Amazing. Many charities, including CPRE branches, struggle to recruit and retain younger trustees. Do you have any thoughts on how, first of all, we can make sure that we are appealing to trustees in terms of those first, I guess, adverts, recruitment, who people are talking to and what they're asking for? And then also how to actually make the experience a positive one? Yes, I think it's really important that encouraging young trustees is part of the strategy. So it's part of the priority of CPRE and the local branches. What was important for me is that when I was looking at trustee positions, that it was very obvious they were looking for younger people on the premise of, diversity of thought and diversity of the demographics. Which is not something you see in many in many charities. So I think it's very important that you get the key messages around the recruitment, that you are looking for X, Y, Z, and it's really important that young people see themselves in these job adverts, because it's very easy, even normal jobs, to think, well, that's not about me at all. So it's keeping that flexibility of saying, yeah, these experiences are great. However, we're more looking for enthusiasm, time, commitment, and that's something that young people can give over experience. Because I've seen plenty of adverts where there's a list of criteria that you think, I read them and go, I don't think I fit those criteria. And then at the bottom, somewhere in the small print in 9-point font, it says, we welcome applicants from all backgrounds. And yes. You go, you don't really mean it though, do you? You want someone who can step in and be like you already. Yeah. Which kind of defeats the object of diversity of thought and lived experience in the room. Absolutely. So how do you think that comes from the chair? If we've got trustees who are sitting on boards kind of going, I absolutely hear what Ryan's saying,
is that a conversation that boards need to be having now, like you say, as part of their strategy?
Yeah, absolutely. So it is about, okay, why do we want young people? How can we get young? How can we communicate that? So where are young people? Social media, maybe, or other areas. How can we reach them? How can we encourage them? I think one aspect that you can do is, particularly if charities don't want to have young people as trustees yet, is to encourage like trustee in training programs. And then firstly, that's a lot more encouraging for younger people who are thinking, okay, this is the step, because becoming a trustee is a very serious thing. And if you don't manage the charity properly, there's very serious consequences. So having those dedicated programs for younger people to join in on those governance discussions and training them is a step that they can do if you don't want to go straight to a trustee position. It is very important, I think, that charities in general, particularly CPRE, because the work we're doing was so focused on protecting the countryside, not just for today, but for tomorrow, is that we need to invest in young people because they are the future leaders and the future defenders of the countryside. So making that part of your strategy and your priorities is really important, I think.
And just in case anyone is going, yeah, but Ryan seems very special. They're not all like that. There's loads of people like Ryan who are desperate for opportunities. I mean, you're great, don't get me wrong.
Thank you.
Unique and special. But there's other unique and special people too. He's not a one-off. Thank you so much. And I don't mean that to diminish you. I mean it to uplift all the other young people. Stephanie, I was digging a hole then when I didn't need to. Sorry. Okay, so tell us about your work at Friends of the Lake District.
Yeah, so I'm an engagement trainee. So I work to connect communities across Cumbria with the projects that we run, our campaigns, whether that be our Hedges and Edges, our fairer housing, litter issues, visitor levy. Work with, so I connect the communities with that, but also connect the communities with the landscapes across Cumbria, which are so varied. So our coastlines, our fells, our lakes, our temperate rainforest. And one of the communities I'm doing more work with is working with more young people.
Great. One of the programmes that Friends of the Lake District runs is the Youth Voice programme. Tell us about what it is and what it's achieving.
Okay, so the Youth Voice programme is an opportunity for young people to share their concerns, ideas to combat these issues, and to let us know what we should be focusing on as an organisation. Young people feel underrepresented across multiple sectors, including the environmental sector, whether that be that they don't think the work that we do supports their concerns, or whether that be that they don't see young people in the organisation or supporting the organisation. And it's about us addressing that problem in some way. If we don't do projects or work that represents them, then we're missing an entire demographic. It's increasingly difficult for young people to get involved as well. As a young person trying to get into the sector, it's, do you have a degree? Do you have the experience? But how do you get that experience? So it's about sort of breaking down those barriers, providing those opportunities for young people to have their voices heard. In terms of achievements, the fact that we have a youth voice is a massive achievement. It's been a programme that we've been working on for the past year. So we do now have a youth voice, and we have 3 members of it so far who are really keen and really passionate. Already they are letting us know what it is they think we should be working on, and also maybe policies that we don't yet have in terms of controversial topics like access and rewilding. As an organisation, we don't necessarily have a stance, and they're letting us know that is something that is very much needed. We've also got a strategy change coming up soon, and so we are getting young people and our youth voice involved in that now. They can let the whole organisation know, and our trustees know what it is that they think we should be doing.
And just tell us a little bit more about the mechanics. Are they online meetings? Are they in person? How frequent are they? How do people communicate? How do you recruit to the group?
So this was something that we didn't have set in stone at the start. We didn't want to kind of go, this is what it looks like and this is what we need from you. We do recognise that they are volunteers and we wanted it to work for them. So working with them, we've come up with the structure that it's sort of monthly meetups. These are a mixture of in-person and online. Cumbria is a very big county, so we want to make it as accessible as possible. At the moment, they're a bit like brainstorming sessions so that they can let us know what we should be doing, but also what we can focus on with them. There are also sessions for them to find out more about us as an organisation and our history and what we've been doing, and to get to explore some of our land as well.
And how do people find you, or how do you find them?
So it's been a mix of methods. So we've gone into local universities and given talks with students to let them know about volunteer opportunities, because it's so important for students to gain that experience. It's been sharing things on our socials. It's been talking with other partners and organisations, such as with other CPRE groups, Ernest Cook Trust, and highlighting it on our website as well. So having as many avenues as possible is the best way to do it.
Great. And it reminds me of the online campaign, Volunteer Activists, which is a national campaign where people get a very discreet and doable action that lands in their inbox, that they can take action on one particular thing. And I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, the biggest growing volunteer group in CPRE's history, because young people want to be part of this, they want to be involved, and they want to find a home with us. Fantastic, thank you. Naomi, so you work on the Hedges and Edges project. Tell us about what that involved.
Yeah, so our Hedges and Edges project, which was last year in large part funded by CPRE's Hedgerow Heroes, so there's a lot of crossover with the work that's going on through Hedgerow Heroes that I was carrying out last year as well in the winter. It's all about restoring hedgerows in the countryside, so planting them, laying them, and kind of improving their management. And last year it was all very much about the physical work, and then over the summer I've also been looking into starting up a citizen science programme, getting volunteers to go out and actually survey the hedgerows using the PTES's Great British Hedgerow Survey method. So it's also not just this practical work of getting more hedgerows into the countryside and better hedgerows into the countryside. It's also about having good quality data about these hedgerows, and robust data so we can gain more funding. So that's kind of my bread and butter at the moment, really.
And is your background sort of charity and campaigning work, or nature recovery and kind of ecology side of things?
Sort of predominantly nature recovery. So I did my degree in wildlife conservation at Nottingham Trent, and my previous role before this was with Ribble Rivers Trust, but that was in an engagement role. And then my role now is kind of running the project. I've taken over from my sort of previous manager, Jack, who's retired now. And I'm now sort of taking that forwards and looking forward to the next round of Hedgerow Heroes Phase 6. So it was really wonderful to hear about that funding yesterday.
Yeah, great news. Does it make a difference when the volunteers turn up that they see that they're being led by another younger person?
I mean, yeah, I think I have had comments from people saying that it's nice to see me there, and it's nice to see someone who is young getting actively involved in a lot of this work. Whilst I was at my university, I ran our Nature Conservation Society, and we had loads of young people, loads of young students coming out. And I think for them, having it be a completely student-run society, we decided the trips, we decided what we were going to do as volunteers, we managed our finances. That really got people interested to have that self-governance and to have that power over what we were doing. So I think when volunteers come out and they see, oh, okay, there's a young person sort of running this and behind the operation, it sort of gives them hope, I guess, like, oh, I could do that. It could be me doing that, rather than seeing it as this unobtainable place that's very hard to get to, I think, for a lot of people.
And I guess as well, a demonstration to people who might underestimate the incredible professionalism of young people to go, oh, they can do that, and do the finances and the governance and the safeguarding and. nature recovery specifically, it feels like, attracts a younger volunteer base sometimes, that kind of practical, hands-on, let's do something about these issues that we care about. Why do you think it does resonate so much, and what can we draw from that in order to help CPRE more broadly across all the campaigning issues that we care about?
Yeah, so I think it very much depends on what you're doing, but I do agree with you that definitely younger people are getting more and more interested in nature recovery and doing direct action, things like that. I think it's because as a younger generation, we've grown up around this atmosphere of climate change, of the destruction of nature and of wild places. I think the younger generation is very much not quite from birth, but our whole lives we've grown up in that atmosphere. So there's this deep sense of, oh God, I should do something about this. And I also think that young people, when we've seen the loss of kind of community services and spaces in many places as the country's finances have sort of wibbled over the years. There's not that many places for people to go. If you want to go and do something which is positive, that has a change in your community as a young person, a really great place to start is nature recovery. And it's also something that nature is inherently got that emotional tie for people. People care about nature. People like animals. It really appeals to them. And I think as a young person looking for something to do, to give back, it's very appealing as a topic.
There are still barriers to volunteering, though, of course. From your experience running this project, do you have advice for us on how to make those practical projects more accessible and inclusive to all?
Yeah, so I think the inherent problem you have with a lot of nature conservation is the fact that you're working rurally, and most people who are young cannot drive. Especially where we are in Cumbria, there are some really great bus routes, but there are a lot of places that we work, a lot of the sites that we own that are not on a major bus route. You cannot get there by public transport. And often volunteer events are in the week, which is understandable because as an adult, you want to still be able to enjoy your weekend occasionally. But I do think that it's important that organisations generally try and provide events that are accessible, that they can provide transport for potentially, and that are at times that people can actually attend at the weekend, in the evening, things like that. And I do think that there's also this massive untapped audience of students who do have that free time during the day, or do have, say you're studying ecology or something like that. It is in your best interest to go and do this volunteering, and you can be a bit more flexible. So I think it's targeting those particular groups as well that have the time to do these things.
Great, thank you. I'm going to open it out to everyone now. Do you have advice on how to make these, perhaps if there's someone who's listening to this sort of saying, oh, maybe that's something that we should be doing. We're not doing it, but it's a bit scary and we don't know how to start, and maybe it'll all go wrong and, egg on our faces and we'll all look very, very silly indeed. What would you advise to boards or teams to help ensure a kind of a strategic plan to engage more young people? How do we make sure it's successful? Stephanie, do you want to go first?
Yeah, so a couple of things. One of them is don't give up. It might feel like you're not getting somewhere, that you're trying and you're not getting the outcomes that you were looking for, but really just keep going with it. As I said, we've been working on our Youth Voice programme for the past year. It's only in January that we started getting applications for it, and it's still something that we're building now. There were moments where we were thinking, do we need to relook at this? And that is part of it as well. It's learning from what's not working. But we're glad we've stuck with it, because we are now starting to see our Youth Voice coming together, and they are an incredible group. I'd say the other thing is don't put all your eggs in one basket. Look at multiple routes in for young people. Youth Voice and volunteer roles can often require a lot of hours, which sometimes young people don't have, but they may still want to support what you're doing and find out more about you as an organisation. So an event that we ran in May was a young person's pub quiz night, all Cumbrian themed, such as place name, anagrams, Cumbrian history, the Cumbrian dialect. So it was a really fun, easy, kind of relaxed evening, and we got 21 young people at that who hadn't had any connection with Friends of the Lake District before. So yeah, it's trying different things and creating multiple avenues as access points for young people.
Great. Fran?
I think some older people can assume that young people aren't professional due to negative stereotypes, but we can be professional and we do have a different perspective to offer. And as Stephanie was saying earlier, it can be hard to gain experience as a young person. And I think you should see it as an opportunity to open that door to someone rather than be intimidated by the support you may have to give them. The other thing is that I would say it's a two-way process. You can learn as much from young people as they can learn from you. I've learned a lot about planning technicalities that I didn't know before, but I've taught people at my branch things about SEO and digital accessibility that they weren't aware of. So just keep in mind that it's a two-way process that can be mutually beneficial for all involved.
It's a degree of humility that is required, is it, Ryan, would you say?
Yeah, I think so. I think for us, particularly, John has always been very receptive of my opinions, and that's great because he's been open to that. Again, it's part of the strategy, so it's in that mindset. I think also for us particularly, we try and be as flexible as we can. So we have quite a lot of international students on our planning as planning volunteers. And so, they're doing work from Hong Kong, or for example, and that's fine. We can work with them. They're doing the work and they're enthusiastic about it. And I think it's also really important to just be mindful that your reason for joining CPRE might not be the same as a young person's. So the motivations might be different. They might be doing it for career progression or to learn new skills or to build part of a community rather than that direct passion and fire that quite a lot of chairs have around the room today about protecting nature. And that's a very personal thing. It might not be as personal to people who are curious, want to be involved, and that passion and that drive will grow from that. So I think understanding that will also be beneficial when you are training and dealing and working with young people.
I love the idea of being CPRE curious. Naomi, do you have thoughts on what not to do? Or maybe what to do.
I could probably touch on both. Yeah, I think one of the things that I always try and think in my head when I'm planning things, especially when I'm if you're planning something for young people, is would this be appealing to me? Not just necessarily as a young person, but just as a person in general. If you want people to get involved in something, it has to be appealing. And I think sometimes you can get stuck on the outcome that you want in your head. And the actual process of getting that outcome ends up being not that appealing for people. So it's trying to think of things for young people which they'll look at and go, oh yeah, that would be really interesting to go to. There's a couple of events that I've run now called Feast and Forage events, where we've run foraging walks and then we've had taster sessions with hedgerow produce food. And there's been a wide range of people who attend these, but lots of young people have turned up because it's something that appeals to them. And then that's gotten them into what we do as an organisation. What not to do, I would say, is to have things not be very well planned. There's been a couple of times in the past where I've tried to volunteer for something and I've not had a response. My role's not been very clear. It's not been very well thought out, and that's a massive barrier. You're young, you're looking at your options. Maybe you're juggling work or studies. You don't want to turn up for something that isn't set in stone, that hasn't been planned very well. So making sure that if you're going to do something, that it's well thought out and the person doing that role, the person getting involved, has a direct line of contact, I would say.
And I guess, fundamentally, it's kind of a golden rule of volunteering to value your volunteers' time and effort, not to take them for granted. we don't actually have time for questions, but we are about to go into a break. And I would urge you all to collar these 4 and ring them for as much information as you require. Because I think the one thing that has become clear to me, absolutely, talking to these 4, but also to the team who've pulled together the panellists, is that a lot of this you don't need to invent the wheel or reinvent the wheel. The expertise is already somewhere in the network, and we can rise together by working effectively and sharing that expertise. Thank you so much. I just want to finish with one final hopeful moment to send us into the break, which is, please, if you could each give me one word to describe what younger people bring to CPRE. Naomi, let's start with you.
Yeah, so the word I chose was legacy, because, you know, if you don't have younger people carrying on the work that you've worked very hard on, you know, you've put all of this effort in, it will eventually fizzle out. So it's making sure that you've got generations getting involved in the fight.
Legacy.
I guess what they bring is energy. It could be that they bring fresh ideas, fresh perspectives, so I guess fresh in there as well. But yeah, it might be a way to look at something new. And I think that young people are wanting to get involved and wanting to come to the table with their ideas, and they just come with so much energy. So
brilliant. Energy?
I think hope. So a lot of young people, you know, we did grow up around, you know, the climate crisis, climate change, the ozone. It was all falling apart. So for young people to come in and say, you know, I'm going to do my bit, we can still make a change and we can reverse climate change and all the rest of it. I think that's really really beautiful, very hopeful. And I also think that it brings hope to hopefully everyone around the room that we do have an enthusiastic next generation to take the next step to protecting the countryside.
Lovely. Legacy, energy, hope, and?
My word is innovation. I think young people can bring a different perspective and fresh ideas. And as Marianne said earlier, it's not necessarily about reinventing the wheel, but almost creating a different angle on it. So how can you communicate what you're doing in different ways, whether that's online or offline, engaging with young people and other marginalised communities who may not be currently familiar with your work.
Amazing. Legacy, energy, hope, and innovation. And if that is not enough to put a smile on your faces and revive the batteries for the work ahead, I don't know what is. Please join me in thanking Naomi, Stephanie, Ryan, and Fran.
Sorry. That's fine. Just all stay there. No, I just got to formally end the meeting. Anyway, thank you all 4 of you. That was just wonderful. And I'm sure everybody thought it was wonderful, and I'm sure you'd have had an opportunity. There's a well-known hierarchy for involvement, which goes consultation, participation, and voice. And several of you use that word voice. And I heard it once described as consultation is saying, you know, we're having a party, come to the party. Then you get participation. Then no, that's consultation. Participation is come and dance with me. But the third one, voice, is saying, well, have a party somewhere else if you want to. And what that means is that I think what we have to learn is not just about inviting you to our party and saying, how can you help us? But what party do you want to actually create? And a couple of you said that. It's about saying, so what's important to you? And then you go off and do it. And that takes, in organizational terms, that takes a very big step. A step of trust and letting go. And I've seen it happen in places, but it's not natural in any organization. Most people want, let's have some young people involved, come and help us. But actually, it's not. And I thought that legacy word was great. I think that's a really fantastic word because that is the future. So anyway, that was a really, really beautiful addition to today's AGM, which, as we know, they're brilliant occasions. And this one has been so far. We've had some great talks, I hope, and I hope you've enjoyed it so far. We're going to have a break now, a reception, then we're going to reconvene at 5 o'clock, is it? Yep, 5 o'clock for Matthew Kelly's talk on the history of CPRE and his new book. But thank you all very much for your participation. Thank you for coming along, and we'll see you in a few minutes' time. Thank you.